Hi, everyone. This is Chris Barnes from East Brunswick Public Library, and this is the first episode of the second season of Read, Watch, Listen, where we talk to people in our community about what they've been reading, watching, and listening. Today, we have a very special guest. It is East Brunswick's very own mayor, Brad Cohen. Mayor Cohen, thank you for being on our podcast today.
Thank you, Chris. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you for taking some time out to talk with us. Now, if you follow Mayor Cohen, you can see he's everywhere in the town. Obviously, it's an extremely busy job to be the mayor. He's everywhere, and you're still a practicing doctor. So, Mayor Cohen, as busy as you are, how do you find time to read and to just, enjoy media?
I think that, isn't there a saying that when you want a job done, you give it to somebody who's got a messy desk because they usually know how to get everything done. So I'm just one of those people. If I don't have a schedule in front of me with everything being filled, I really think that I must have forgotten something or I've missed something. So it's just a matter of managing your schedule well. My schedule for my office hours are fairly consistent. It's also nighttime appointments for the mayor's office and weekends. So it doesn't mean that there's not free time in between all of those things. And that's when you need to sort of let your hair down and maybe turn off the cell phone and either read something or watch a movie or listen to some music, exercise, get out and let your mind rest. And I do get that.
I do think it's a good tip is to shut off the cell phone. I find myself always looking at it for fear of missing out.
Yeah, I don't know how we ever live without it, to be honest with you.
Oh, I know. All right, well, we're going to back now into the meat of the show. It's what you've been reading. So, Mayor Cohen, what was the last good book you read?
Well, actually, the last one I reread was a book written by Michael Kessler called Shards of War, which is a true story. And as you may know, Chris, he was a really prominent member of our community and passed away at the ripe old age of 96 or 97. He's a survivor during World War II. And his story is a little bit different. As many Holocaust survivors' individual experience was a little bit different in the middle of such a epic horror. But his was unique in the sense that he was never in a camp. He was somebody who fortunately was able to escape within really minutes ahead of the German front and ended up working his way through Europe, ultimately to Uzbekistan, and all the way just minutes to hours ahead of the German front. So it was a harrowing experience that he and his sibling had gone through. And I just find the story to be so eye-opening because we just went through pandemic here. Hopefully the worst of it is behind us. And all I hear about is how everybody was suffering and everybody never had to experience anything as difficult as this before. And here you sit and read the story of maybe 2 generations ago, not that long ago in the greater scheme of history. And it just puts it all in perspective. A lot of people, unfortunately, have succumbed to the disease, but we had all the modern conveniences. We have vaccines and treatments and ways to communicate, ways to conduct business, and we're able to get outdoors and connect to one another through social media or through computers or many, many different things that were never available. So I guess it makes me have to think that you have to put life and all of your experiences into a perspective. And when you read about history and those before us that have gone through such harrowing experiences, it puts all of that into its proper perspective.
That's a great choice. I read that book too. It's such a powerful story, and his writing style was so straightforward, and it was a really good read, and I highly recommend that. And I'm glad that you recommended it.
Yeah, and he's written other books. His wife died of cancer years ago, but she was also a survivor, and her story, I forget the name of her book, but it was also very personal. But my father-in-law was a survivor himself. His story was unique and different. He actually was in a camp. And so clearly everybody went through this horrible period of time, but each one had a unique and different experience. And there's something to be learned from that. And I think that that's what draws me to the history books and movies and stories more than anything, because some of the real life stories, you couldn't make that stuff up. And besides learning from it, there is an entertainment value to them because it's hard to believe they were actually true. I find myself leaning in that direction most of the time, whether it's a movie or a book. I find those the most fascinating.
No, that's a great choice. We're going to segue now. What was the last good thing that you watched, whether it was a movie or a TV show?
I think all of us have gotten sort of addicted to the Netflix series and the Hulu series and Amazon series because being at home all these months, you've been able to have time to actually go through a whole series. And so I was watching CNN had a whole story about Princess Diana, which I found very interesting because, again, it goes to show you that what you were learning and listening to at the time when these events were taking place and the way the media may have portrayed things to you are often very different than the way they actually are. And in the political climate that we're living in today, where people are being fed information from the media, either side of the media, we need to take a look and recognize that it might not be so entirely accurate. And real life is probably somewhat different than what you're being given out by the media. And if it happened in the past, in less controversial stories than in the ones that we're living in today, I would place my bet on the accuracy of the information you're being given. Don't take everything at face value. And I find that stories like this that go back and look at historical events that I've lived through and then find out how different it was than the way it was being portrayed tells you something as a lesson to the things you're hearing about right now.
That's a good choice. All right, and we're going to wrap it up with our third question. Mayor Cohen, what have you been listening to?
I have a wide variety of music that I listen to. I don't really listen to podcasts too much. I actually am trying to get into some, but more often than not, I listen to a wide variety of music, whether I'm outdoors running or walking or jogging. It just lets me get my mind off of the daily grind. It gives my brain a chance to rest. And my music is very varied. I could listen to classical music. I could listen to rock. I could listen to hip hop, which my kids laugh at because they say, I can't believe that my 61-year-old dad's listening to this stuff. And country music, which I've started to enjoy. So my musical taste is very varied, but it's an escape for me. I've always loved the arts. I've always loved music. I was a musician in high school. I was one of those band geeks that my kids love to call me. So I was really into all of that. And it's my safe place and a chance to get into a Zen mode and relax. So that to me is my way of relaxing and take a chance to regroup and I guess let the battery recharge.
Do you have a go-to musician that you listen to when you go jogging?
Not really. I like to just put it on shuffle and whatever comes up. I like the variety. So no, I don't have any specific one. I guess I'm still a Jersey guy, so I do like my Springsteen.
Well, in New Jersey, that's what you have to do. It's a prerequisite to live in the...
I would think so, right. I mean, I'm really a Jersey guy. I grew up in Jersey my whole life. I think other than my 4 years of college, everything that I've ever done, whether it's medical school, I did business school, everything has been in New Jersey other than my 4 years of college. And that was in Muhlenberg, which is in Allentown, which is literally 15 minutes out of the Jersey border. So I never really strayed that far. So I'm a real Jersey guy.
No, it's true. New Jersey is the greatest state in the country.
It is. I really believe that.
It is. We have everything. That wraps up this week's episode of Read, Watch, Listen. Mayor Cohen, thank you again for being our special guest this week. You can check out our previous episodes online at ebpl.org/podcast. We look forward to having more episodes. Again, Mayor Cohen, thank you for being our guest today. For East Brunswick Public Library, I'm Chris Barnes. Thank you for listening, and special thanks to our producer, Melissa Hosick, for making this sound great. See you at the library.
Thanks, Chris.
Hey everyone, this is Chris Barnes from the East Brunswick Public Library podcast. We're back with another episode of Read, Watch, Listen, and we find out what people have been enjoying at the library. Today's special guest is Assistant Director here at East Brunswick Public Library. His name is Mike Bobish. He's an all-around swell guy, a coffee aficionado. How else can I describe you?
That's a good question. I never thought about it that way. Purveyor of fine microbrews? I have no idea.
Mike is very interesting. We have crossed paths several times through the last 2 decades in library land. And Mike is always good for a good story, a good dad joke, and a good book recommendation. So thank you for agreeing to be on our podcast today.
Before we get started, I just want to say that it's a joy to finally be on the air with you live. It's like getting 2 pillars of the EBPL broadcasting community together. It's like a super group, like the Traveling Wilburys or Voltron.
Points for the Voltron reference. Okay, so the first part of Read, Watch, Listen is reading. Mike, what have you read lately?
Okay, so Chris, as you know, I'm the father of 2 young children. I have a 5-year-old boy and a 2-year-old boy. So I hate to say it, but I've become kind of illiterate over the past 5 years and don't read for grownups anymore, although I have a few that I have read. But it's been mostly kids' books. I read my kids 3 stories at bedtime each. So I'm much more versed in children's literature than I ever anticipated I would be.
Are there any popular titles in the Bobish household that the little ones like to hear at bed?
Yes. So the one that's currently in heavy rotation is a book called 10 Fat Turkeys. It's a pretty amazing tale of 10 turkeys that get onto a fence and each one of them do something crazy on said fence and end up falling off. And spoiler alert to our listeners, but at the very end, the fence itself had too much and it ends up falling apart. So that is being appreciated by both boys right now. Another book that we got for my oldest at the start of the pandemic that's also sees heavy rotation is called Nobody Hugs a Cactus. It's basically about a cactus who's just doing his Zen meditation thing on a windowsill, and all these pesky creatures from the desert come over and say hi to him. And he starts off, kind of prickly, as you may expect from a cactus, but realizes that all he really wants is a hug. But finally, when he's ready to have that type of interaction, nobody wants to hug the cactus. It's a cute book. It's well done. It's well drawn, but it also was good from a parenting perspective because it helped my kid learn about loneliness and how to reach out, especially in this time where people are distant. So it's worked out pretty well. Also, too, both of my kids are big motion and movement kids. Anything that has to do with a truck is good. Dynatrucks, a series by Chris Gall, is very popular in the household with both kids. Revenge of the Dynatrucks follow-up is a good book as well. And of course, the landmark Good Night construction site. So those are the ones that often see play during our bedtime routines.
Very cool. So the second part of our show is, what are you watching? It could be a movie, a television show. It could be a kid show that you've been enjoying or something that you've enjoyed or something in the past you have.
Oh, sure. I'm a huge science fiction fan, and I dragged my wife into the habit as well. We just finished rewatching season 3 of Star Trek Discovery, which is a newer Star Trek series that was put out on what was CBS All Access and is now Paramount Plus, but it is available on DVD and Blu-ray now. So we rewatched that, and we just started season 4 of that as well.
Very cool. Now, who's your favorite crew member of the Discovery?
Saru.
I've seen the first 2 seasons. I know I'm behind, but I'm behind on everything. So in 4 years, I'll be caught up once the show has its spectacular finale. But he's a pretty cool character. I like the episode where they go into his people and his whole backstory about the hiding and being basically a whole culture that is based on being prey for another alien race at all times. And it's just a different outlook, a little grim, but it's a pretty cool story of watching him grow. So
yeah, whenever Star Trek prequels would introduce a new race that supposedly existed for time immemorial, but you never saw before, it always felt a little astroturfy to me, but they handled the Kelpians very, very well. You're right. The whole prey dynamic, I think, was a really unique one. And plus, he's just a cool character, well acted, and adds a dimension to that show that I think would have lacked otherwise.
Yeah. Oh, and even with his visual design, because I know they have a budget, there's only so much that you can create, but they do such a good job of making him visually different from all the other humanoids and other aliens that we've seen in Star Trek for the last, 50, 60 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like his size is different, just his mannerisms, his posture. Yeah, they do a good job of making him be kind of like a person, but completely different. So
yes,
it's very cool. All right. And last one. It's very funny since we're doing this on Zoom. We can see our headphones. Mike, what are you listening to?
Now I'm listening to your dulcet tones. But other than that, it's weird. So the music app that I use in my personal life is YouTube Music, which probably isn't the best one that's out there, but it's just something I glommed onto because I have a Pixel phone and it was there. But my playlists are almost completely dominated by either novelty music or hard rock. It has an algorithm that tries to predict what you're going to listen to. And finally, one day it was like, just shut up, listen to Tenacious D and like it. And it's like all it picks for me anymore. I gotta admit, it's pretty accurate. It's kind of rare to blend the two genres, but they do a pretty decent job.
Yeah, I would say from loud rock and roll and comedy gimmick stuff, Jack Black has a certain history track record of doing that. That wraps it up for Read, Watch, Listen. If you look in the comments section on this, we'll have links to everything Mike's been enjoying so you can find it at the library. This episode was produced by Melissa Hosick. You can listen to previous episodes of the show online on Spotify or Anchor.fm. Check out the rest of our podcasts. We hope to see you at the library very soon. And for more information about what's going on at your favorite public library, visit us online at www.ebpl.org. Thanks. Hey everyone, how's it going? You are listening to another episode of Read, Watch, Listen on the East Brunswick Public Library Podcast Network. I'm your host, Chris Barnes, and we're talking about what people like to read, watch, and listen from East Brunswick Public Library. This week, we have a very special guest. The guest is me. Due to some scheduling difficulties, our previous guest had to cancel, so usually I host, but this time I'm going to be telling you what I've been reading, watching, and listening, and how you can find it at East Brunswick Public Library. The first thing that we're going to talk about is what have I read recently that I liked? What I do like to read are graphic novels. I love comics. I love comic art. I love it all. And my latest finish is Bad Weekend by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. They've been putting out a ongoing anthology series called Criminal, which is crime noir stories. Ed Brubaker, you might be familiar with his name, even if you're not too big into comic books, because he created the Winter Soldier storyline that Marvel based its movies on. Bad Weekend is a pretty funny and dark tale. It's about what happens at a comic book convention. I know that doesn't sound like the biggest high crime environment, but it is. We learn about Hal Crane, who was a comic creator from the beginning. He got screwed by a lot of publishers and a lot of his coworkers, and he is planning a major heist at a comic show. All the while, he's going to be accepting a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he's planning on telling off everyone in the industry. It's dark. It's funny. You would love this if this was a movie, and we have it at the library. You can download it on Hoopla Digital as an ebook. Next for Read, Watch, and Listen, we are going to go to The Watch, and I'm going to recommend a television show that I love. It's called Halt and Catch Fire. There's 4 seasons of it. The library owns the first 2 seasons on DVD. It never got a mainstream 3rd and 4th season DVD release, but you can find it on the usual streaming suspects like Amazon, Hulu, AMC Plus. Halt and Catch Fire is about the computer industry in the 1980s, and it chronicles 4 coworkers / friends who are hell-bent on making an impact and changing the world. The biggest problem is themselves and when they work together. You know how there's the phrase that there's no I in team? These 4 people, they have an amazingly, beautifully complex and complicated relationship. And if it's not each other standing in their own way, it's themselves. Lee Pace is in it. He is phenomenal as Joe McMillan, who's kind of the straw that stirs the drink in this tech world. It's such a beautifully done show. The creators had 4 seasons to tell a story that spans about 15 or 16 years. So it's very fast paced. There's no wasted time or scenes in it, and it's powerful. There's a lot of really good plot twists and swerves in it, and I love it. It is just so good to watch. And my final recommendation is in the listen category. So I'm very clearly an 80s baby. I turned 40 this year. I'm sitting in my studio with a Transformers coffee mug. I have Star Wars art in front of me. So I'm kind of predisposed like anything from the 80s. So I'm going to recommend Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction that you can find on Hoopla Digital. Now, I know everyone knows every song on Appetite for Destruction. Everyone's been talking about it for almost 35, almost 40 years now. But a couple of years ago, they put out what they called the Super Duper edition of the album, which meant that there was 5 discs worth of outtakes, bonus material, unreleased versions of songs, early versions, demos, live stuff. If you are a Guns N' Roses completist, you want this version. However, it was limited edition and it was way too expensive for anyone to, put down money on, myself included. So a couple weeks ago, while I was looking for something else on Hoopla Digital, I saw that they had it, and that was immediately one of my monthly download credits. There's over 4 hours of outtakes, live versions. It's one of the greatest rock and roll albums of all times, and now you're going to hear so many different versions of the classic songs. And blows my mind how cool this is. That is something you should definitely check out. I just can't recommend it enough. So that's going to finish it up for this edition of Read, Watch, Listen. I'm Chris Barnes from East Brunswick Public Library. Special thanks to our producer, Melissa Hosick, who's on the other side of the line, editing and making this go up on time. You can find all the information about what we talked about in this week's episodes in the liner notes. You can listen to this on all your favorite podcast formats like Anchor.fm, Spotify. You know the deal. We have tons of great podcasts, other Read, Watch, Listens for you to check out. We have program reviews, a ton of great stuff and audio content. We're always adding new stuff, so make sure you like and subscribe. For the latest information about what's going on at East Brunswick Public Library, check us out online at www.ebpl.org. And for Chris Barnes, thanks for listening. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Read, Watch, Listen on the East Brunswick Public Library Podcast Network. I'm your host, Chris Barnes, and today we have a special guest, one of the newer faces here in the library. I'd like to introduce Sade Green-Puik. She is our new Youth Services Manager. How are you doing, Sade?
Hello, I'm good.
So Sade's joined us in the last couple months, and she is Manager in Youth Services. She is a children's librarian extraordinaire. Sade, why did you want to be a children's librarian?
Oh, I want to be a children's librarian just because it's just so much fun. The children's books are awesome. And then working with kids, and I also work with teens sometimes. They're just a good time. They really are. From crafts and tweens, and they will tell you like it is. There's no filter, so they'll let you know what's up.
I have a 3-year-old at home, so I completely know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So now, do you prefer older kids or little kids or teenagers or?
I like working with everybody, but I work with tweens a lot, and they're a lot of fun because they really are stuck in between. And so the things that they say and the questions, so we really do have a good time.
And I've noticed this myself because you're a little younger than I am, but that tween age is the age of kids where it's really weird. And I think they've been neglected for a long time in libraries and just in general, because it's either you're a happy little kid or you're a teenager in high school who's doing a million things. And that middle age group is kind of on their own. And it's nice to see that they're getting more attention and love in library world.
Exactly. We've been really trying and get them acknowledged and do programs for them and all that good stuff.
Well, I know I'm biased because I'm your coworker, but you're doing a great job.
Why, thank you.
Okay, we're going to get on with our show. It's Read, Watch, Listen, where we talk to our library customers and library staff about the media that they've been enjoying and to get some recommendations. You can find most of these here at the library. And if you check your show notes, we'll put links to it in the catalog or where you can find it. We're going to start off with a read. Sade, what is a book that you recommend?
I read The Poison Heart by Kaylin Byron. I always mess up names. I'm terrible. And I have such a complicated name. So you think I'd be better at people's names, but I'm not. The Poison Heart is a YA book, and it was about a teenage girl who was able to control plants and stuff. And I'm obsessed with plants, so it was my jam.
Now, do you have a favorite plant?
I really like the snake plant because it's easy to grow and mine's like out of control. So yeah.
Well, if it's easy to grow, that's a good one. That makes the read component of our show. So, what have you been watching?
Well, my husband's obsessed with Star Wars. And of course, we ended up talking about Star Wars on this podcast. How ironic. And so I've been watching the Book of Boba Fett. And even though it comes on once a week, we have to watch that. And then we have to watch YouTube, all the little sneak things that we may have missed, and then all the reviews. So it's this whole thing. So that's what I've been watching. And then I've also been watching Encanto because that's my favorite because we don't talk about Bruno. I've been singing that nonstop. It's also my ringtone.
Okay, now this is actually a great thing. I've seen all the memes and jokes from my friends on social media about it. So could you please explain the show to me? Because I am completely lost.
Encanto is a Disney movie, and basically it's this large family in Colombia, and they all have different gifts, and it's just such a fun movie. Great songs, and one young woman does not have a gift, so she's trying to figure out her place in the family because she doesn't have the gift like everybody else. And it's so great, and everyone's singing, and you should play it for your daughter because it's so good. And then we can sing We Don't Talk About Bruno because that's my jam again.
Well, now I know, and I feel so much more hip and relevant.
Mhm.
Speaking of music, lastly, what have you been listening to?
Okay. My listening is all over the place because I have a commute. So I'll listen to audiobooks. And then, like, my podcast, I'll listen to Crime Junkie. So that's true crime. And then another podcast, I'll flip over and be epic gardening. I got to know all my gardening tips and tricks because I have to be ready for gardening season because you got to be ready for that. And then for my music, I'm still in the 90s and early 2000s hip hop and pop. I'm going to forever sing the Spice Girls. It's just who I am as a person.
It's important. It's also really scary when you start thinking about it that it's 25 years of Spice Girls.
Yeah, it is what it is. It comes on and this is my jam and I'm going to sing this. Thank you.
But that's like the thing. They put out one album of stuff that's going to be playing in the clubs forever, and everybody wants that career.
Exactly.
Thank you for being on the show today, Sade. And if you want to find any of Sade and the rest of the great children's programs we have going on at the library, check us out on our online calendar. You can visit it at www.ebpl.org/calendar. This concludes yet another episode of Read, Watch, Listen on the East Brunswick Public Library Podcast Network. Special thanks to our producer, Melissa Hozick, who makes us sound so great and cool. And you can check this out, plus tons of other podcasts that we have recorded online at www.ebpl.org/podcast. For Chris Barnes, thanks for listening. Hey everyone, welcome back to the East Brunswick Public Library Podcast Network for another episode of Read, Watch, Listen. I'm your host, Chris Barnes, and today we have a very special guest. He is a former president of the library's Board of Trustees. He's a current member. Wayne Christie, thanks for being on our podcast today.
Chris, thanks for inviting me. I love this opportunity.
Wayne is involved in the library, a ton of other organizations in the community. You can find him in the library more often than not. He's also a super user. So he's not only a trustee, but he's also a customer. So he knows pretty much everything that goes on in the library.
Yeah, and there is a lot that definitely goes on in the library without a doubt. There's so many things that we can explore. I mean, you have languages that you can learn, you can take out, games, there's still even the CDs. I'm constantly learning what's new and available. I mean, you can download movies. It's a great place. It's the community center as far as I'm concerned of the town.
Well, thank you, and thanks for being our trustee. This is Read, Watch, Listen, and we talk about the various media that you've been enjoying and for recommendations for our listeners. The first one is, Wayne, what have you read recently?
I'm actually listening to audio. It's The Coddling of the American Mind. Phenomenal book, very intense. I'm really enjoying it, and it speaks to the times at the present day, even more so than when it was written, which is about 3 years ago. I'm almost done with the book. I got another half a CD left, and I'm done. Something that I think people should absolutely read or listen to. I'm also reading a couple of Spencer, Robert B. Parker books. One was with Mike Lupica, and one is with, I forgot who the latest one is writing for, as the Spencer. Mike Lupica writes for Sonny Randall books, I believe.
With those series of books where an author is no longer writing them, he's farmed it out to someone else, or in that case, the author's passed on and there's a new team. Do you like the new version as much as the original one?
Yeah, I do actually. They stay true to form. It's been great. And as a matter of fact, with the original Robert Parker Spencer books, I've actually started going back from the beginning, and I'm already at about the 13th or 14th book. I'm up to Taming the Seahorse. It's been fun reading them, and you don't see the difference. They really stay true to the formula. They don't make it their own, so to speak.
No, sounds good. I read a lot of comic books, and when you have a new author or a new artist on the book, it can make or break it. So I'm glad these are working out for you as a super fan.
Absolutely. I love these. And when the new one comes out, I can't wait to get it. I'm also reading Cleo Coyle. She writes these Coffee House series mysteries, and the latest one has just come out, and I know I have to finish it in 3 weeks because I know somebody else is going to want it. It's called Honey Roasted. Really good. Her series is great. What the real authors are, it's a husband and wife team, and they call themselves Cleo Coyle. They have other books too, but I haven't read those at all.
That sounds interesting. The next topic is listen. What have you been listening to? Like music-wise, what would you recommend?
Music-wise, probably, oh my God, I listen to almost everything. I listen from anything from Bob Marley to Bruce Springsteen to the Stones, Fields and Crofts, and that type of stuff.
Uh-huh.
So I have that guilty pleasure as well. I like that 70s type of thing, and even early 80s. Believe it or not, I do like Air Supply, but at the same time, I'll listen to the Stones, I'll listen to The Who, I'll listen to pretty much a wide range of music. I even enjoy my kids' music somewhat, believe it or not. My son's into Big D and the Kids Table. He listens to the Wonder Years, and he'll play that stuff for me every so often. My daughter's into country. I like that occasionally. I'll listen to it as well as on the radio, so I'll throw it on. So, yeah, I'll do a wide spectrum. It's just what I'm in the mood for, so to speak. But if I need to be pumped up, it's definitely going to be solid rock. It's going to be Dire Straits, Springsteen, Southside Johnny's great, Elvis Costello, anything that can get me going.
Very cool. Last but not least, Wayne, what have you watched recently?
So what I've watched recently, believe it or not, is Cobra Kai. Love it, love it, love it.
So good.
Absolutely. It's so bad that it's so good. I am halfway through the season. I savor it like fine wine, okay? The other thing I am looking forward to, Mrs. Maisel. We're going to savor that also. You can't just go blitzing through these things because then you got to wait another year for these episodes. I also watched Catherine, the great show on Hulu. I watched the first season. That was really good. But you know what it is? I want it in half-hour blips. I don't want it in hour-long type things. So the half-hour shows do it for me much more so than the hour shows.
I hear you. It feels like it's less of a commitment, especially if it's not going so well.
Right. You could bail. You do the episode and still bail out and not feel totally bad about it. Movie-wise, do you remember the movie with Dustin Hoffman and Natalie Portman? He owns a toy shop, Mr. McGorium's Emporium. Great movie. Watch with the kids. Very easygoing and truly a pleasure. And I like the line he says, well, today I'm going to die. What do you mean you're going to die today? He goes, I bought these shoes from an Italian shoemaker, and when the last one, and Natalie Portman doesn't believe him, and he passes away. He was perfectly fine. He lived 400 and something years.
Well, I can't argue with any of those TV or movie recommendations, so all solid. Wayne, we're going to thank you for being on our podcast today. If you look in the show notes, we're going to have links to everything that's in our catalog, so you can check it out to read, watch, or listen. Special thanks to our producer, Melissa Hozick, who's back at the East Brunswick Public Library studio making this sound so good. You can check out all of our podcasts at ebpl.org/podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. I'm Chris Barnes for the East Brunswick Public Library, and we'll see you later. Thanks.